I always thought marriage was built on trust, but the night I discovered my wife's betrayal, I learned that trust can be the sharpest knife in the back. Emily had been distant for months. Her phone clutched tightly as if it were a lifeline. Whispers in the kitchen when she thought I was asleep. Laughter that wasn't meant for me. Signs I dismissed until they bled into a picture too clear to ignore. And then one evening, she told me she wanted a quiet night at home. Just us, she said with a sweet smile that felt rehearsed. But my gut told me there was someone else behind that performance, and I was right. Because hidden deep in her messages, which I finally dared to check, I saw him. Mark, a co-worker of hers, a man I'd met once at a company dinner, shaking his hand not knowing that same hand would be touching what I thought was mine. They had planned everything, right down to the wine she said she'd bought for us, but the twist was she never knew I had seen their plans, never guessed I was already moving the chess pieces before she poured the first glass. I could have confronted her, could have screamed, cursed, thrown her lies in her face, but rage gives only fire while silence gives strategy, and so I stayed calm, playing my role, telling her I'd be home late from work, letting her believe the house was theirs for the night. But behind the curtain, I made one move that would turn her perfect little affair into ashes. I called his wife Sarah. I still remember the silence on the phone when I told her. The way her breath caught, the sound of disbelief turning into trembling fury as I read out the messages word for word. Proof of what she must have suspected but never dared to confront. And then, instead of tears, she laughed, a sharp, broken laugh, and whispered, "Tell me where and when." The stage was set. Emily dressed in that silk dress I once loved, the one she used to reserve for anniversaries, her hair curled like she was preparing for a date night, but not with me. She lit candles, dimmed the lights, put on soft music as if she were living inside some cheap romance novel. And when Mark arrived at the door, she kissed him there, bold and careless, the same lips that once promised me forever. They didn't know I was already waiting nearby, hidden in the shadows of my own home, every second boiling me alive but keeping me steady, because tonight wasn't about pain, it was about exposure. Sarah arrived quietly, slipping through the side gate as planned, her face pale but her eyes burning like coals. And when she saw them on the couch, Emily giggling, Mark's hands wandering where they shouldn't, she didn't rush, she didn't scream. She simply looked at me and nodded, and that nod was all I needed. I stepped into the living room, slow, deliberate, as Emily froze mid-laugh, the color draining from her face like blood from a wound. Mark jerking upright, stammering excuses that dissolved in the air. But before either of them could form a lie, Sarah walked in behind me, and the silence that followed was louder than any thunder. Emily whispered my name like a prayer, but there was no saving grace here, only the weight of the trap she had walked straight into. "You invited him into our home," I said, my voice steady though my hands trembled. "But I thought it was only fair to invite his wife too." And the look on her face, shock, humiliation, dread, was the sweetest revenge I could have ever tasted, because for once, her performance shattered, her lies stripped naked in front of the only two people she feared most. Sarah didn't hesitate. She slapped Mark so hard the sound echoed through the room. Years of betrayal crashing into that single strike. And Emily broke, crying, begging, swearing it was a mistake, but her crocodile tears drowned in the silence between us. I didn't shout, I didn't argue, I simply picked up the overnight bag I had packed earlier, walked to the door, and left them both there. Emily collapsing in sobs, Mark chasing after Sarah as she stormed out. Two liars suddenly exposed under the same roof they tried to poison. And as I drove away, I felt no pain, no regret, only a cold satisfaction, because sometimes revenge isn't about destruction, it's about letting the guilty destroy themselves under the weight of their own lies, and watching silently as their world burns without ever lifting a hand.